Every few years, I take a job at all the job listings out there and find out there's yet another job title added to the mix. So I thought it would be fun to go through all of the job titles that I've seen throughout my career, plot it on some kind of timeline, and attempt to describe what I think they are. This isn't meant to be a historically accurate reenactment of the job titles of UX design, but just everything I have encountered throughout my career. So let's start by grabbing this timeline over from a template I found. So let's start with early 2000s. Factors engineer, or what was the other one? Usability engineer. Back then, it was really the big companies such as IBM and NASA who were some of the few places that were hiring human factors engineers. And as a grad student, those jobs were very much on my radar. And I think human factors engineer and usability engineer, they were used interchangeably. And I think the umbrella they fell under at the companies was called user-centered design. And that was getting popular at the tech companies at the time, such as Intuit and Symantec are some of the ones that I know. Everyone was taking processes from different disciplines, different ways of working from different disciplines, and applying it to user experience. So there was a lot of heuristic analyses, Gestalt principles, error prevention, learnability. To me, that was a really exciting time because I went into grad school studying this obscure academic discipline, which is somehow useful now in this new world of the internet. And around 2007, I think this was the advent of interaction designer. Around this time, there was a distinction between an interaction designer, a visual designer, and a user researcher. This was really the group of people who were building the front end, right? This was the era of like SaaS and, software as a service. You don't have to buy your software in a box anymore. It started to be delivered on the web. Interaction designer was pretty simple. You designed the interaction or the transition between the pages, either through wireframes. Back then you used omnigraphal stencils, and with the stencils, you could get pretty close to final design, but it was really up to the visual designer to give it the final red line, pixel perfect, brand appropriate design afterwards. So user researchers would do the research, either the user testing or the generative research, and the engineer would build the front end, and they would work with the rest of the engineers to put it all together. That was that era. Probably around 2010 is the era of UX designer. Interaction designer started fading away to become UX designer. I feel like nothing really changed in the role itself. It was still kind of the same mix of visual designers and user researchers. There was a lot more integration within the development itself. You worked with the full stack engineers to ultimately build the experience of it, like how it would actually work, as well as how it would look. The industry was maturing a little bit. A user experience designer really encompasses the entire experience and not just the interactions. You're a little bit more integrated into the engineer development cycle. And then around 2016 to like now, this was an interesting one. Product designer. And then there's this new thing called UI designer. That came into the mix This was interesting because prior to this, a product designer would imply an industrial designer who designed things like watches or chairs or something you physically use, like a bike or something. And the UX UI designer, I'm actually not sure what that is supposed to be. But I feel like a product designer nowadays, as I developed a better sense of what the term product means in the context of technology products, I started to like this title more and more, and I started calling myself a product designer. UX UI designer, um, this one is a head scratcher. It's a bit of a divisive topic online, with some people embracing it and some demanding we stop using it. I'm probably in the latter camp. I don't really know what it is. Why UX UI designer? What is the difference between a UX UI designer and the 2010s version of a UX designer? I don't know what the difference is. I don't know why we decided to add this to the mix. Leave a comment below if you have strong opinions about this title. Honorable mention goes to John Maeda and his concept of computational designer. This came on my radar in 2018 when I started subscribing to his design and tech report. From what I gather, he coined this term in 1999, so it's quite old. Computational designer is a designer who understands programming and can use it as a tool for design. Such a designer can create designs that are more interactive, dynamic, and responsive to user input, which can lead to more engaging and effective user experiences. If you think about it from the early 2000s time frame, from the human factors and usability engineer era, it really foreshadowed what this discipline really became, right? Because now we work very closely with development. We need to understand what is possible with the infrastructure and the code that's already there. So there is an element of that. Somehow this never took off. He really foreshadowed the industry with computational designer. Variations and combinations of all of these titles are still in use today. A few days ago, I got an email from a recruiter looking for an interaction designer, which I thought was obsolete. I thought we weren't called interaction designers anymore. I don't know. So comment down below if you have ideas on what we'll be called in 5 years' time, because we seem to love inventing new titles for ourselves.